Temperature and humidity control. To protect the fit racing pigeon from losing form, the temperature in the loft must be above 10 and below 30 degrees Celsius, and the humidity kept below 65%. These are the conditions that favor continuing health and known as the thermoneutral zone for the pigeon. In most lofts, it is the humidity, more than the temperature, which determines whether the birds rest or not at night. Humidity measures the amount of moisture in the air, irrespective of the air temperature, but it is the high humidity, greater than 65%, associated with the temperatures below 15 degrees Celsius that most affects the pigeon's ability to rest. The pigeon loses form and becomes susceptible to illness when it does not get adequate rest. The droppings in the loft are the best indication of the humidity levels. In the healthy loft, a low humidity, less than 55%, gives a consistently nutty brown dropping, whereas a higher humidity, greater than 65%, will produce green watery droppings. At nighttime, when the pigeons need to rest, there is always a rise in the humidity, because as the temperature drops the humidity rises. This explains the droppings turning wet and green the morning after a cold humid night, but which then turn nutty brown by the afternoon as the day warms up and the humidity drops. No two lofts, even if they are identical, will have the same humidity levels, because the humidity inside the loft relates directly to the humidity outside the loft. The controlling factor of humidity is the location, or geography, of the loft. Often fanciers will recreate their previously successful loft design when they move from one house to another but find that they are no longer successful flyers. The only difference is the location of the loft. High humidity risk lofts. Lofts near water, ocean, lakes, rivers, waterways, drainage channels, swim pools. Lofts adjacent to large open low-lying areas, grassy areas, foggy areas. Lofts without sunshine to dry the ground, under trees, in valleys, on the wrong side of the hill and no sun until late in the afternoon. Lofts in high rainfall areas. These lofts require a loft design that stops the outside humidity, moisture, entering the loft. Insulation is the first step to controlling fluctuating temperatures and high humidity inside the loft. It is the moisture drops of condensation appearing on the inside of uninsulated walls and ceilings that increase the humidity inside the loft to the very high levels that predispose the race birds to restlessness and respiratory illnesses. The insulation of the walls and ceiling will stop this condensation and allow you to control respiratory diseases with the minimal use of medicines. In high humidity areas, shutting the loft up at night or when it is raining is a good method of controlling the humidity inside the loft. Louvers are commonly used, but the air circulation and the air quality inside the loft must not be compromised. Too often the loft is completely shut up with no thought about air circulation. The resulting stale loft makes the race birds lethargic due to lack of oxygen. Temperature and humidity. You never want the loft to be sweltering with heat, likewise it should never be freezing cold. The ideal temperature many fanciers swear by is around 20 degrees Celsius or 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Perhaps more important than achieving an exact optimum temperature though is ensuring the temperature doesn't fluctuate too much, i.e. it's not 5 degrees in the morning and 30 degrees by the afternoon. As long as the temperature is constant, whether cooler, as it is in winter, or slightly warmer, the pigeons can come into form. Humidity takes oxygen out of the air and as such is another important factor to consider, especially in warmer, more tropical climates. Ideally, humidity levels should be kept between 60% to 70%. A hygrometer is a useful tool to keep an eye on the humidity in the loft. Additionally, the droppings can also be an indicator. Nutty brown droppings generally tend to indicate a lower humidity while green watery droppings a higher humidity. Capacity. Overcrowding the pigeon loft can increase fighting, make the birds restless, limit the amount of oxygen intake each bird has access to and increase stress levels which can have negative health consequences in and of itself. It's very important to plan how many birds you want to keep in each section and ensure that there are enough perches, boxes, feeding trays etc. for each bird. With young birds, it's better to have more than enough facilities as going without their own box/perch can negatively impact the pigeons from a psychological standpoint. When it comes to air capacity, there's an old Belgian rule stating that it's best to allow 1 cubic meter of air per 2 birds, in other words, 18 cubic feet of air per bird. Never underestimate the importance of oxygen, and while we have already mentioned it above, it's worth doing so again when considering young birds. A lack of oxygen can severely affect the development of a pigeon. It's quite common in young bird racing to think that if you start with 100 or so youngsters and lose half, the half that were lost must have been the less intelligent and weaker pigeons. And while we may be quick to blame genetics for this, in actual fact, it's quite possible that those lost pigeons simply did not have the chance to develop to their fullest potential due to a lack of oxygen. That being the case, we have wasted both time and good blood because the loft had insufficient space, and therefore insufficient air capacity per bird to handle the number of pigeons being housed.